Hi, I'm Jim Clark, Visual Arts Manager here at Hopkins Center for the Arts. Today we're speaking with Fred Cogelow, a.k.a. fredgelow somebody, a.k.a. the artist formerly known as fredgelow.
No, artist formerly known as somebody.
Formerly known as somebody, and not nobody.
Yeah, hardly a nobody, and no, hardly just anybody, and certainly not a nobody, whatever.
Very good. And his exhibition, Good Dog, on view now through September 6th, September 6th, 2025. Fred, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah. I've known you about 15 years.
I would guess, yeah.
Yeah, and in that time, I know you not only to be a gifted, hardworking, incredible sculptor, but you have an incredibly creative command of language. If I were an English major, I'd say it was Joycean. But that brings me to a question, our first question.
Yes.
The title of the exhibition, Good Dog, because in our communications, I feel like your use of language is every word has manifold meanings. And its veracity sometimes in question.
Yes.
So Good Dog,
Good
what
Dog.
is the origin of Good Dog as a title?
It was one of those things where I wanted to do I recently sold my last life-size lady and didn't have a life-size individual to, for this exhibit. And I knew I wouldn't have time to do one in the round, so I did this fellow in relief. And it was something where I do a lot of my design work with camera and have all sorts of pictures here and there, and ran across an old photo of this fellow. It showed him from about there up at an auction in, south of Belgrade, Minnesota in March of '74. And he was truly savoring whatever it was he was eating. And it took me a while to figure it out. There was actually a barbecue. But to render a barbecue in wood, it's kind of amorphous, it doesn't really stand out well. And so I thought, we'll change it to a dog, hot dog. And he's savoring it, so it's a good dog. And that, of course, lends to the Norwegian god dag, which means good day. And it also is reflective of my character, because I'm basically a canine-ish sort of character. So I try to be a good dog.
It's packed full of meaning with two simple words.
Yes.
But it's carrying a lot.
Yeah, it would have been better if they were sinful words, but simple had to do.
Very good. You speak of this freestanding sculpture as being in relief.
It is relief, yes.
Versus in the round. Can you explain relief for folks that might not?
Relief basically just means protruding from the plane, and there's your bas relief, which is a low relief, and I don't know if I do have one. In the back there, you can see it later, there's one called Mother and Child. It was one of my very early works, and bas relief is characterized by no undercutting, and it can range anything from the relief you see on a coin to something quite a bit more substantial. And then you have your mezzo relief, which is the in-between, where you have some undercutting and repeated exploitation and orchestration of the depth. And then you've got your traditional high relief, which in its truest form just has almost an in the round figure set against a bas relief background. And I do very little that I would really call high relief, but
Strata, would that?
That would qualify, I think, as high relief. Yeah. There's
What's the full
100%.
title of that one? Strata.
Strata Cornelia, Bucharest. One that was based on some photographs I took of a pair of grandparents and two of their grandchildren, and it was apparently after some sort of a high school or not high school, elementary athletic competition, and the boy had won something, so he kept playing with his medal, and the mother had a bouquet or the grandmother had a bouquet to congratulate him.
Yeah.
And then the granddaughter was feigning fear of me and clutching to her grandpa and making the most of the event, and it just made for a good composition, I thought. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice on that one actually that I combined two different perspectives. It's a wide angle on the bottom and kind of more of not quite a telephoto, but a sort of a standard view on the top, and just to see if I could get away with it, because I'm dang foolish, and I shouldn't have done it because it's too much work, but I did it. And that was when I also experiment with my finishes, and I really don't know what I'm doing. I have no training at all in colors and finishes, and I'm colorblind a little bit besides. And anyway, with that particular piece, I finished the thing in time to submit it to the State Fair. It got accepted in the Fine Arts exhibition, and then I set it away and got it down there and opened up the crate, and I was appalled because the finish had evolved, and I didn't like it a bit. And by the time I picked it up from the State Fair, it was even worse. And so I put it in the crate, left it there for 2 years, and it improved. So now it's okay. And
What do you attribute it to?
It has various things to do with, for what little ultraviolet exposure it had, that would have some effect. And a lot of it was just the transition of the oils in the wood and evaporation and whatnot. Sure. And I'm not really sure, but
it did finally settle into.
It is settled into something that's reasonably. It's something where I had a fine oil painter tell me once that avoid white. It's death, it draws the eye too much or whatever. Mm-hmm. So this guy looks like Einstein, and he had this wonderful head of white hair, and I wanted to feature that, but yet not make it that overpowering. But anyway, you'll have to look at it and see what you think of it.
Through that experience, have you continued to use those formulations in finishes and anticipated how they would shift over time?
My problem is I don't take notes on anything. Yeah. And you think, I'm going to remember how this was, but I don't. And so it's something where I have experimented with a few different oils, and I will probably never use teak oil again. That was worse than most of them for changing the effect during the time that it sat there, and that's featured on the one that's in the State Fair now. I have one piece that's in the State Fair now, and you never know what you're going to get until it's been cured for 4, 5, 6, 8 months. Who knows? But anyway, so it's a gamble, and it's maybe stupid of me to do it, because as you see, like this lady where it's just all a natural finish, she does just fine. But then again, with the piece behind Jim there, it's one of those things where combining bleaching with a little bit of burning and tinting and whatnot, it makes things pop in a way that doesn't. And once you start playing with it, it's almost, it's like fentanyl. You get addicted, even if you don't know what you're doing.
So has everything lately been treated in that way with multiple finishes?
Most of them have.
Yeah.
This one I did very limited bleaching and staining, and I forget, he was finished in April or May or something. But no, it's and it gets to be a real drag after spending all these hours carving something to spend more hours put the finish on. So if I can get the finish done in 4 hours or less, that's great.
Sure.
Even if it turns out disastrous.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of disaster, these obviously take hundreds, if not thousands of hours.
No,
How long?
not thousands of hours. I bet there's,
In the most extensive piece, do you want to take a stab at how long?
there might be some that much bigger than these that took 1,000 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I stopped keeping track of the hours back in 1983 because I figured it took a lot of time to record the hours and it wasn't of any point anyway because you don't get paid by the hour.
For sure, for sure.
It's designer firewood.
Designer firewood. But it's a ton of time investment in the labor of carving. And then when you go to put the finish on, do you test your finish before? Because there's the potential, I would imagine, to essentially ruin that which you've invested all these hours in. So how do you manage that?
See, I try to be an environmentalist and try to waste as little finish as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I never mix up more than I really need. So
Sure.
each time I mix it, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so it ends up with a lot of problems there.
Yeah.
And it's also one of those things where it's interesting with the wood that currently what I'm doing is kind of a wet on wet finish where I'll put on, it might be a thin coat of the oil or it might be a straight coat of the oil. And then while that's still wet, then I'll take another coat or I've mixed in oil paint with it and then apply that. And you're never quite sure just how much that stuff is going to soak in.
Yeah.
And it's also something when you do the bleaching too, you don't know for sure how well and uniform that bleaching is until you put a finish over it. And then of course it's too late to bleach some more. So there's a considerable gamble involved. But
And a test on another piece wouldn't be of
No,
great
it's-
benefit because you're dealing with the particular
Yeah.
grain and
yeah, no, you have a general knowledge of what is to be expected, but it's something where I should really be more careful than I am in applying. It's something where I look at these women that do rose molding and all the paint they waste putting it on the side and getting everything just the right tint and all that. And
Sure.
strength and that's what I should do too. I should have a whole big vat of it and that's all of one consistency and
Right.
being able to apply that. But
not
anyway,
in your character.
not in my character, but
I have a feeling your definition of disaster might be different than the rest of us. But have you had disastrous results with finish before?
I've had some pretty, I guess that, the one behind, the one there on the little face on the limb of detritus,
Yeah.
that one is just sort of looks like mud. And so that one at this point is a little bit disastrous and that's part of why it's priced so cheaply, but anyway. That's something where I might experiment with that yet and do some painting or whatever, but otherwise most of my disasters are in the carving itself. And a lot of these are actually rejects that I put a long way for maybe 25 years before I decided, well, you can do something with that yet. So anyway.
Thank you for sharing your rejects with
And
us.
this is my current reject here. She's been hanging around since 2021. And back at the time that I did the Strada Cornelia, the Romanian family on the other side, I got to thinking of how am I going to sell this? And I thought, and then also it's something where I'm getting kind of ancient. And so I'm trying to figure out how will I get rid of all this stuff eventually. And I thought I need to get a saleswoman to handle my estate. And on our trip to Romania, I encountered one particular lady who caught me surreptitiously photographing her, which is something I feel a little guilty about. but it's something where if you ask people if you can take their picture, it's kind of hard to get them to be spontaneous and genuine and real. So I had taken her picture and she realized it and came in. And it's somewhere, the Romanians have a wonderful social safety network. And they say that if your husband, when he died, left you some shoes, you can go out and sell them on the street. That's your safety network. Anyway, she was just sort of panhandling, and I had photographed her, and she came after me for a donation. And anyway, I went and I decided I would change her and make it so that she really had her hand held out for a contribution. But I thought that if she's going to handle my estate, then she should be holding a small bust of me in her hand. And then she would have in Romania, a lot of times they like to have their little private backyard space, a little courtyard or whatever in the back of their homes. And sometimes they will border on the main thoroughfare. And so then they'll have a wall there, but then they have a really fancy gate going into it. And I thought, well, she could stand in front of this gate and then have my carvings, including that one, hung around it. And I didn't get a picture of that, but I should send one. But anyway, and then, so I hung various carvings around this mock-up gate I put behind her. And then I made a sign that is supposed to read, it actually is in Czech and it reads, "Watch out, flammable." But her sign was going to say, "For sale, wood carvings, cheap." And then also good used wheelbarrow. But anyway, but I brought her along because she is a reject. This is part of the dilemmas that face a person that starts carving without thinking quite enough, you know. And it's something where with a relief carving, it's primarily a third dimensional enhancement of a linear composition. And so if the composition is the critical item, the linear composition, the problem is that you also have to consider the range of viewing, the aesthetic range of viewing. And with a bas relief, it's usually pretty good because there's nothing to obscure things or get in the way. But with this lady, it's something where once you get more than a few degrees to either side of straight on, then you start to realize that her stomach, her abdomen doesn't protrude nearly enough, or whatever. So then it's at that point where I have to decide what the heck to do here. I'm reluctant to throw the whole thing away because this is made from a butternut tree that I planted myself. It's the only one that survived to any maturity because there's something killing them off called Wisconsin canker. But I have the options of, this is just a temporary piece in basswood, but replacing that in butternut, and then I could do something where I basically cut her off below her bosom and finish her up and save her that way. Or I can take and try something where I basically cut off her legs and then come and chop her off here and then again under the bosom. And of course with this here, it's easy enough to do that part, and then follow underneath the arm here, and then put a skirting on the back so I can bring her abdomen out another 3-4 inches, and then complete her. And it's a lot of work, and it's going to be sloppy because there's no way to do a joint like that and get it really tight all the way. So it might violate my rule about using wood fillers, but anyway, that is the temptation. But a lot of that's simply because of the fact that it's a tree that's special to me that yielded the butternut. And it's also something where you might notice that this was a very fast-growing tree for most of its life, and so you can contrast the wood and the color of this one with some of the other butternut pieces about. So anyway.
So this portion of the forearm
Yep.
and the hand holding your bust, that's essentially a three-dimensional sketch.
That's a sketch, yes.
Yeah.
I ordinarily don't do much sketching. It is something like I say, if I'm using a photograph for the model, then I just shoot from that. And but a lot of these pieces are, there might be something like the two Handine brothers against the wall there. They were just free-handed and changed and exaggerated a bit from the original photos, but I wanted to emphasize the one, Fred's hands there, because he was a super powerful guy. And the lady behind the horse there, she was somebody we saw at a funeral, and I did a sketch on the funeral bulletin, and then I started carving her, and then I thought there's no way I was going to pull it off because I've foreshortened the back lens there, her left lens of her glasses, and so I almost burned the thing, and then I thought, you know, I bet I can save that. And so I saved that, and then I just thought there's too much good wood there to carve yet, and so I carved the other faces besides. But anyway.
How often do you start a piece and follow it through to the end, and it doesn't go, you know, into the corner of the studio for a bit, and the quote-unquote rejects?
I think most of my projects these days get interrupted for weeks or months or something at some point, but I don't know. I suppose that there might be a fifth of them that end up gathering dust for months or years, but
When you reach an impasse and then you got to step back and...
Well, it's not so much an impasse as deciding for the moment that it ain't worth doing. You wasted your time. And then it changed my mind.
Yeah.
But anyway, and this guy was a reject for many years too, and there are certain threads that kind of keep recurring in the production process, and I harvest my own wood and have for pretty much all of my career except for the butternut or the mahogany, and that's a long story. But anyway, because the butternuts are dying off, I try to leave them standing for as long as possible and wait until they're dead. And so I had my eye on particular one really fine-looking specimen, and I watched that tree for years, and finally it started to lose a lot of its foliage, and so I rushed in and put my saw into it, and it was hollow. Beautiful log, and it was hollow for the first bottom 10 feet or whatever of it. And so I cut it down and took portions of the upper story that were good, and the bottom stuff, it still had a thick enough wall that I thought, well, I got to save this. And so there's one piece that's at the storage for a supersized kubastol, a Norwegian log chair. It's going to be about that high, I think. And part of it that I cut out became the back for the Norwegian wheelchair in the back corner. And this was yet another piece, and it was over 8 inches thick in various areas. And I, somewhere along the line, decided to do Winkin Lincoln, Abe Winkin, and but I foolishly didn't do any real studies to figure out a number of things, and so I kept, I'd work on it for a little bit and then put it away, and it wasn't until I finally just got tired of tripping on the thing in my storeroom that I decided to finish up. And then I foolishly had I'd started to make this the low shoulder instead of that one, and I decided that's the wrong thing to do, and so I had to really fight to get this shoulder as far forward as I could and that one back. But anyway, that's old Abe, and anyway, I barely saved him. There's maybe 1/4 inch thickness or less.
Lincoln makes a number of occurrences. He's a persistent muse,
Yep.
it appears.
And it's your fault.
Wow. I get blamed for all sorts of things,
Yes,
but
well,
I don't know that I've ever been blamed for this.
In this case, it genuinely is.
Really?
Yes, because you asked me to be an artist for the day or whatever
Yeah.
at the state fair.
Yeah.
And I needed something quick to work on, and I had one piece of wood that was sitting around. It was long and narrow, and it had a little bit of initial larval activity in it. And I wanted to get it rid of, and I either had to burn it or use it. It was somewhere ordinarily, something like this would have been in my storeroom and stuff that was bug-free, but with that last life-size lady I had to give her a hand and a walking stick out on a piece of wood, and took something from my country storage, and anyway, I had this piece of wood left over, and I looked at it and I thought, what can I do with this? And
Yeah.
I've always liked Abe Lincoln, and so I went down to the state fair and hacked away on it, and it was
12 hours.
a good piece to work on. And then I got home, and then it would have gone into indefinite moratorium, but as it was, there was a crew coming down from Fargo to do a little film on me, and I needed to work on something that was already in progress, and so I worked on it and it kept going. But anyway, so that was the first Lincoln,
Wow.
and then he led to this one, and then there was
You
a
got one over
little
there.
study there just for use on finishes again. But
Did you do it, as they say, blind, without reference, and purely from absorbing his likeness? Or?
yeah, basically that's how they started, and then you'd look at something and then you'd lose your reference, and then you'd
Take a penny out.
take it out. Yeah, no,
Fiber.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
no, but it might have been better if it had been a serious study. One of the problems is that Miller here knows him. There's a fellow that hangs out with the Scandinavian woodcarvers, even though he's German.
Sure.
And he has a very Lincoln-esque face, and so I would stalk him with my camera and try to get him to oblige me with a wink. And that bugger just did everything he could to avoid me and be non-compliant. So anyway.
Speaking of subjects, so do they always start with a photograph of
No.
someone?
No, it's something like, sometimes it's, well, let's see. They usually do, like, in the back there's one where it's, I forget what the name of the title is, but it was two pictures from the newspaper, one of some general or whatever, and then a lady was pleased with her investments. And so I combined the two of them, and then there's the, well, this one too here, if I can. Here.
Please don't touch the art, sir.
The latex has a certain adhesive quality. So anyway, this started with something where we used to have a group of Norwegian American carvers that would get together in northern Wisconsin every March. And on our way up there one year, we picked up a Burger King crown, and we have a friend who has this magnificent head, just a big, large head, and very distinctive features that you find commonly in Norwegians and Icelanders. But anyway, he was clowning around with it, and I don't even recall if I took a picture of him or not, or just sketched him. But anyway, I had a piece of wood that was of lower grade because it had worms in it and it left, but or beetle larvae. Anyway, I just carved his face in there for fun. Well, then it got to be that why not do a little bit more? And then of course you think of a guy with a crown and an expression of madness, you think of King George III. And then so I thought, well, I'd throw some of his beef eaters in on top, and then his, I forget what his name is, his prime minister for kind of a cow catcher on his wheelchair, whatever. And it was something where things just didn't look right, and this was a little bit too fragile to have a minister coming around his forehead. So it originally was an experiment in relief, but then because I had to add to it, then I just started working the way around, and then you've got the guy in the back of his head. And I always figured it was sort of the time of Bill Clinton, and so I figured, every male in authority has that sort of philandering instinct, and so I thought I better throw in some woman and make her a little kinky too with a cat of nine tails, and then I found out later, of course, that George III was absolutely faithful to his wife. It was his son George IV that kind of made up for things by being a real philanderer. But anyway, so that's just how it evolved. And this too had actually been in the rejects, except I had to do a demonstration down at Vesterheim and had something that was in progress. And part of why I was rejected was because my initial lamination back here did not succeed. So I relaminated it and went to work on it. But anyway, that's sort of the evolution of the process. But
maybe somewhat related to the content of that piece, you describe yourself as self-taught. You went to University of Chicago for political science.
yes,
Have you always been an artist? Were you an artist before that?
I've been a compulsive creator, but I don't believe that I should. I think it's one of the deficiencies of the English language is that we tend to call anyone that creates anything an artist.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's art until it evokes a response in you, the viewer. So I'm just a guy that makes stuff. You can call me a sculptor because I sculpt,
Yeah.
but I am leery to call myself an artist. It's somewhere you can call what I make art if you want, if it moves you, but I'm just the guy who makes things. Anyway, Fred.
Identifying by the action.
Yep.
Yeah. And the artist in honorific, which I would call you an artist. Yeah.
You're entitled to if you've had that
inclination.
response, if you've had that response to my work.
That
yes.
response.
But it's somewhere I can't call myself an artist.
Sure.
Okay.
I respect that. So what was your first carving? Because we've got over 50 years.
Yep.
This represents, we've got work from 74,
Yep.
great year, till today, essentially.
The first carving I did was on my mother's breadboard when I was about 8 years old. And it was just an emoji. My father was dead, but he left some palm tools, and it had one little gouge blade, and so I just made a little emoji face. And she was not happy. I did not get any positive reinforcement, which of course is a real bummer. Anyway, then it was also something where my father had a couple of sections of old big fir moving beams, house moving beams, and the one was about yay tall, and I wanted to, having sophisticated tastes at that age, I wanted to do a bust of Alfred E. Newman, or not a bust, but a whole statue.
Mad Magazine.
Yep, the what me worry guy. Anyway, my mother went and, without asking me, after I was the one that kind of took care of things, and without asking me, she gave it to the neighbor to burn. So he cut it up. So I was left with just that little stub that's behind our cameraman there. And so at age 17, fresh out of high school, I spent 6 hours with a dull carpenter's chisel and a torch trying to carve in that miserable wood, and it was miserable wood. It was a soft, punky ring next to a real hard ring, and came up with that poor face. And anyway, I didn't know I didn't. At that, after 6 hours, I left it, and it was just, a bump for a nose and 2 depressions for eyes, basically. And I left it alone for another 6 years, and then I came back, and it was when I worked night watch at the local state hospital dealing with adolescents, and we had a school on a unit, and one of the kids had taken a 2x4 as part of the class project and rounded off one corner, and I thought I could do better than that. And so then they had Albert the alligator there in the Pogo comic strip, and I sketched it on there and profiled it a bit. And that's when I started going
Sure.
in
In,
1974.
it really started going in 74.
Pretty
Is
much,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
It was actually when I quit that job, I intended to do cabinetry and other woodworking, and then I got one commission that involved a little carving on the cabinet, and I found I was much better at carving on the cabinet than making the cabinet, and so that's when it took off.
And you have a signature set of tools.
I do.
If you tell us about that. I mean,
They're great for opening paint cans. It's something where there's an English tool company named Henry Taylor, and they had put up a $5,000 prize 2 years in a row down in Davenport, and I took it the one year, and I don't know how it came about, but I had been doing some experimenting and suggested some skewed gouges. And they had me come out with a set, and they sold very well. I've got a lot of returns out of that, but
do you use them as well?
I use them quite a bit.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're more for a serious carver than most of the people that bought them. And
Sure.
so most people that bought them didn't know what they're doing with them. And since then, I actually have come up with a number of other tools I have designed that are much more functional for just about everybody. But they were willing to produce those, but I had to do a lot of promotion to go along with it, and I didn't have time to do the promotion. So.
Sure. We've got 3 photos on display of your studio from, I think, the 80s, the 90s, and more recently. And then we've got a couple of photos from this
Today.
morning.
Yep.
Yeah? So we can pass these around.
As they say,
Maybe I'll send
cleanliness
one
is next
this
to
way and
godliness.
one this way.
Everything in its place, and I know just where everything is.
You've seen my desk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your desk doesn't hold a candle to my desk.
Well, you're firing up my competitive spirit.
Okay.
The earliest image, it is quite orderly and clean. Has that been in evolution over time?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Now, it's going to be part of my upcoming book, but I just delve into my psychological disorders. It starts with JE, which is junk envy, and then there's JDD, which is junk deficit disorder, and that all leads to CAD, which is not computer assisted design, it's compulsive acquisition disorder. But anyway, no, it's actually something, I think it's a genetic thing. My father had it. My cousin that I took care of when she developed dementia had it. And it was great because she kept the same order that my father had, so I knew where everything was. I needed to make repairs and stuff, and she'd, saved every bit of 2x4 and plywood piece that I needed. So
Sure.
but anyway, it's something where I presently do need to thin down somewhat, but surprisingly a lot of it is stuff that either fits into potential sculptures or whatever, but you can't use it if you don't got it, so I save everything. But anyway.
Let's open it up to questions.
All right.
The butternut, is it the color or because it doesn't crack, or does it crack?
Oh.
Why do you choose butternut?
Butternut is a good one to use for carving because it's a little bit softer than its cousin walnut, black walnut. It's about 75% the weight of black walnut, and so it's softer. It's generally easier to carve. Well, it's not always the case. There's some really obnoxious butternut from South Carolina that you don't want to touch. But that and basswood is also softer and lighter, and both of them are very stable compared to most other woods. With butternut, I can take it to the sawmill and cut it into 8-inch slabs at times, and not have it check. The checking it checking is the splitting that you get on the ends, and it's because the end grain loses moisture 7 times faster than the surface grain. So, but you'll notice that if you were to catch this guy, that it's still something where you, for purposes of stability and whatnot, I hollow the pieces out as much as possible, and but no,
Do you use power tools?
I do. I use saws whenever possible. I like to use power drills with special bits for hollowing out.
Sanding?
I don't do any sanding. Sanding does have its purpose for filling pores and whatnot, but with my detail, it's too hard to do any uniform sanding, and so I just try to get by with having sharp tools.
Well, and I feel like you'd lose the beautiful microplane texture. Like I'd look at that as marks in space, and it's just gorgeous to look at, independent of what you're representing.
There are pluses and minuses.
What are the minuses?
Oh, I mean, well, the minus are you lose those little marks.
Oh, okay.
But the plus,
Of the sanding.
yeah,
You
the
got
plus
it.
it depends on your style and whatnot.
Sure.
And your aims and the finish.
Yeah.
I didn't plan on this.
That's all right.
I was wondering what nationality you are.
What would you guess?
Well, you look so much like Daniel Erickson
Oh, is that right?
in Hanley Falls, Minnesota, who was married to Gunda.
Oh, is that right? That poor fellow. He has my sympathies. Anyway.
Well, they could only snacka norsk.
Ja, I snakker litt norsk.
Norsk? That's a little Norwegian for
Lite
the rest of
grann.
you.
Yes, no, I'm 3/4 Norwegian and 1/4 Czech.
Hey, Fred, how are you?
You look vaguely familiar.
Yes, yes. I've seen me before, too.
Anyway,
My question is around composition, and there's 2 parts to it. How do you approach composition is the first part of it, in terms of classical composition, the various patterns, et cetera, that you can have in the art making world. And the second one is, how do you then pair your compositional ideas with a piece of wood, in which you will be able to articulate that composition? And how closely are those paired?
with regard to the latter, basically it's somewhere the wood will, your basic concern with the wood is to disguise your joints, and your composition. It's being I'm primarily a portrait artist. The concern is to get an interesting subject to start with, an interesting expression, and beyond that, you look for the little nuances that make it interesting, and you look for, like a spiral line. If it's in the round, a spiral flow to it will be more interesting than a fence post. Mm-hmm. And with something like the piece, I basically try to have something where you have your eye enter the picture on some line, and then try to keep your eye within the composition by the flow of lines throughout the piece. And it's always something where I believe too that rules exist to be broken, and so if you have a precept that's how something should look, follow it generally, but invite yourself to break it once in a while. So anyway.
To piggyback on Mark's question, like with the masks
Yep.
or the busts, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
And the emphasis is on likeness and character.
Yep.
But on a piece like this, which is intensely complex, with not just capturing likeness, but some torque distortion,
Yep.
anamorphic
Yep.
distortion to make up for
Lack of depth.
the lack of depth,
Yep.
and then all the things that are going on around it. Did you plan that out beforehand? Did you have a photograph essentially of this, or did you?
The background is entirely fictitious. I had my eye on these two characters for decades before I finally used them. I should say decades, at least a decade and a half. And I finally, and actually it was somewhere, the horse and the one handler was inspired by a friend from England, took a shot of some guys at a horse show. And I changed a number of things and thought this is the way to use them. Basically, and there are things I didn't like his head on any of the shots, and so I took a shot that I'd taken of him years before and actually decapitated him and turned it the other way and
Sure.
stuff. And it was somewhere. This guy had wonderful range of expressions, but in every picture I took of him, I think I've taken over 100 pictures over the time I knew him. And I don't know if there's any difference in any of his expressions, but anyway, and then this particular hame and the accoutrements, they were from my own collection of hames. And
In the compositing of all these different references, is it going on primarily within your head, or are you using
Well,
Photoshop? Or
some here I just kind of drew out some, we had on some converging lines and tried to figure out what I could do that in make an artificial construct of a barn that would provide the maximum of the illusion of depth with somewhat of an economy of effort. But no, the shot was taken in a modern pole barn, and so there was none of the background available. But
Yes, thank you. This is great. This is probably a simpler, less artistic question, but to what degree do you use just a single block of wood, and you reference joints and laminates, and what degree do you use those, and how do you determine when you do one versus the other?
if it's possible, I use, I don't like making joints, and I'm unusual in that, unlike most carvers, I prefer not to use applied and inserted details, even if it would save a lot of time. I like to try to carve it all out of one piece wherever possible. But on some of these, in order to not waste a lot of wood and to make the tightest joint possible, I will sometimes carve a fair bit of the composition before I make the last laminations. And like, he's got a joint here where this is added in here. I think it goes like all the way through here. And then I think I see the lamination there. But anyway, that's joined. Otherwise, it's all, lamination is when it's face to face that you're gluing them up, and joining is side to side. And so this one has, let's see, one, so just two. There are three pieces joined at least this way, and then, but I like to cut my timbers as large as possible to escape that. But no, it's, and something like the lady here, in order to make her stable, the log isn't quite large enough to accommodate, the whole lady. So where I'd add to her for her elbows and for the basket of eggs, that enabled me to drill inside of her and hollow her out. And the easiest joints to mask are end grain ones, and so I drill a 2-inch hole through the top of her head, down in all the way through her neck and down deeper, but that allows me to get inside her head and hollow her out a bit, and that makes for greater stability over the lifetime. And it makes her weigh less too, easier to transport.
Thank you. So the majority of the works here have been a single block of wood.
I'd have to think about that. It's 50-50, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
But a lot of times they're glued up and then carved as one piece. But
I have infinite questions, but I won't ask all of them. Sometimes when you encounter a piece of wood that's rotted to the point where it's become spongy,
yeah,
do you just burn that, or do you stabilize that in some fashion?
I generally don't carve the rot. Like there's that mast hanging on the pole there. It was one hunk it was a long beam, and at the end of it there was a column of punk in the end of it, and it was such nice wood around the periphery that I carved a mask out of it. But no, it's something where it's no, I stay away from the rotten wood pretty much. I think there might have been one time when I put some stuff into it to solid harden up, but I'm not even sure of that.
How do you keep the bugs from continuing on? You talked about stabilizing this one. Do you
It's
coat it
kind of
with
interesting
something?
with the bugs, because there are some times when you harvest a log or whatever and it has a lot of larval holes in it, and they've departed. And I don't know, they maybe have been threatened with tariffs or something, I don't know. But and there's other ones where they're very active. It's something where if I'm working with a log, I try to start as green as possible, rough it out, and then hollow it out, and then I try to have it open for a year with some air flowing through it to dry it out. And the bugs will depart once the humidity is below a certain percent. You can kill dry it, kill them. Actually with her, I believe we went and I actually hired, one of the extermination companies to come, and we put her in a small building and an old outhouse actually, and sealed it up, and they have some little pellets that you sprinkle you separate them in a little cardboard box, because if you get them too close to each other, you burn the whole place up. But anyway, we sealed her up in there, and I think it was like 2 weeks later we could open her up and get to work on her. But so I think that's the way we handled her. Otherwise, I have a indoor drying room in my studio, and I am pretty assiduous about keeping any bugs out of that. And otherwise, it's something where if you carve it where there's no room left for them to operate much, and if it's a small piece, I'll heat it in the microwave until they're dead. And if it's a larger piece, once I try to design where I can carve all the wormholes out of them, or get it thin enough that alcohol will penetrate, or there are various ways of dealing with it, but no, you don't want to. You want to make sure the bugs are dead.
You're also a scientist.
I am?
Well, it sounds
Not
like
much
it.
of one, but yeah, no, it's gradually you learn over time a little bit of this stuff, but anyway.
So you harvest your butternut.
Yep.
So like you've got butternut in the backyard. What's up with this? Or do
I
you drive around with a chainsaw?
I had this tree in the side yard right outside the bay window, but otherwise I used to have a forester that looked kindly upon me, and so whenever he'd run across butternut out in the area, then he would say, "We got this lumber sale, and that's kind of odd, little extra there, you used to give the guy the guy will sell it to you." So I'd go out and get it. And
So is that black market butternut or what?
Yeah.
not quite, no, but it was on the up and up. But yeah, no, I used to tell people I would wait till the farmer left, and then I would drive in quickly and.
When you were talking before, you were talking about when you first started.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to what you used to carve at that time. Did you start like whittling with a
Oh, that's a terrible
pocket
word, that
knife or-
whittling.
Yeah, I would imagine, but yeah.
Do we need to ask her to leave?
He wants me to.
I have friends from England that will spit if you mention the word whittling.
Yeah. I kind of thought that. but-
Whittling is done with a knife, and carving can involve whittling, but it's also with standard edge tools, which are the gouges and the V-tools and whatnot.
So
But
when you were
anyway,
first starting
when I
out,
first started, I just had my father's tools,
oh,
and
okay.
he had, I think, 3 different carving blades that would fit into a interchangeable blades that went into a handle. And before I even left my 3 years employment at the state hospital, I went down to Chicago and bought some German carving tools. And so I think I started with about 12 tools plus my father's, and then a couple knives. But then as soon as I started entering competitions, I started winning a lot of tools, and then when the tools are alone at night, they get romantic, and next thing you know, you got little tools, and yeah, so I probably have somewhere 1,300 edge tools, I don't know, but I actually have given away a lot of them to people that I hoped would be promising wood carvers, but they're pretty hard to find. It's hard to, I'm looking for the person with the right compulsive disorder to that I'd like to give my studio to someday, but it's hard to find that individual, so anyway.
I've been down to Mayo Clinic and saw your sculpture down in a little shop.
Yep.
And I've seen at Calvary Church in Wilmer,
Yep.
your relief. So how much of your work is out there that's not here?
Oh, well, I have a registry that I actually didn't start it until number 146, I think. Might have been 143. But, and then I just took a guess at as to how many pieces I've done. Since then, I've kept a registry. And occasionally I forget to put one in there, but I think it's up like 757 or something at present. But, you know, a lot of them are pretty minor pieces, but.
And for context, there's about 60 on display.
Yep.
So
You talked about rejects. Are there pieces that you really enjoy, that you like, that you're happy with?
yeah.
I am a Norwegian Lutheran, so I am prohibited by nature from being entirely happy with anything, except my wife.
It sounds like you start with a photo or an image.
Sometimes, yeah.
And then you find the piece of wood to make it out of. Do you ever do it the other way, which is to find a piece of wood and then you see in that piece of wood what you want to, what's going to come out of there?
Very rarely will I do that. It actually is something where the piece in the corner there, my morning after breakfast companion, the hermaphrodite with the beer, the stale beer. That was one where I harvested a black walnut tree that had been used as a fence post. And so I kind of drilled out as much of the barbed wire and nails as I could before we brought it to the sawmill. But when it got to a certain point, then we just had to chop off the end of the log and to continue sawing it. And so I had that piece that was maybe, I don't know, 12 by 10 or something, and walnut will not cure in that dimension unless you have a huge microwave. And so I having gone to Chicago where they had all sorts of neo-Gothic architecture and a lot of gargoyles, I went and I thought, let's do a gargoyle. And so I sketched it out and then roughed it out, and then I did a lamination where you take a piece of heavy paper, like a cereal box sort of paper, you know, and so I glued up another 2 laminations to the edge of it and then finished roughing it out, and then you split that off along the paper, and then you let it dry out, and then you, after it's dry, then you put it back together and finish it. And so it actually something there where if you take that guy and turn him upside down and shake him around, you can hear the barbed wire and nails that I threw back inside of his cranium. You can hear them rattle around. But anyway.
Fred, thank you so much for sharing your work with our community.
My pleasure.